You're listening to a podcast of spurious morality.
Hello and welcome to a podcast of spurious morality. I'm Johnstone and with me I have Gareth. Hello, Gareth.
Hello.
And we're continuing our 275 journey, our journey through the entire monthly range from Big Finish, and we've hit what you could perhaps call the first major milestone because we're adding a doctor. We've had some great adventures so far with the 5th, 6th and 7th Doctors, but I think the ones we're going to be talking about today kind of really gave this range what it needed to properly get going, which was a new Doctor. It was Paul McGann. And Paul McGann had appeared in the TV movie, and that was it. So we kind of had this entirely unexplored Doctor. Now, I've spoken previously about how in this range, I find that the 6th Doctor and the 7th Doctor are slightly more exciting than the 5th Doctor because there are gaps at the end of their eras. Like the 6th Doctor, we kind of know a lot of time happened between Trial of a Time Lord and Time in the Rani. The 7th Doctor stopped at Survival and then regenerated in the movie. And again, we know there's a big gap there, which had already been filled by books and stuff. So I do find that quite exciting. You know, we're continuing those two Doctors' adventures beyond what was on screen. But this is different. This is a whole new Doctor to explore. One who appeared for, I mean, it wasn't even 90 minutes. It takes half an hour for the 8th Doctor to turn up in the movie, doesn't it? So basically, this character had certainly less than an hour of screen time. And outside of comics and books, there was nothing going on. Like there was no more performed Doctor Who with this Doctor. So this was, I guess, how I view it anyway. It's the start of a new ongoing Doctor, and that sort of ongoing run kind of carried on right through to the end of Stranded, which was only a few years ago. And even then, we still have adventures with this Doctor, with the 8th Doctor set in the Time War and blah, blah, blah. But it all came from here. And it must have been so important that they got this right, because I think consensus of the movie was good Doctor, not so great movie. Is that fair to say, do you think?
I think so. I mean, I was quite young at the time, so I was just thrilled to have anything. But yeah, critically, I think it ended up being sort of, it was a very strange kind of shape of Doctor Who, because it obviously wanted to be something a little bit different because they were trying to launch in America. Yeah, it was a kind of weird halfway house where it sort of had too much continuity and not enough. Yeah, I think people kind of bristled at it, but very much enjoyed the production quality of it. I mean, just looking at the TARDIS kind of makes me sad now because I think, you know, you could have had a whole TV show of that thing. You get the sound effects in Big Finish at least, but yeah, what could have been, I think, mostly is about that performance and the production design.
Yeah, I mean that TARDIS in the movie, it's a beautiful interior and exterior. Like it's a lovely police box prop. And yeah, it's there's a lot of what we could have had there. You know, we talked last time about what you could have had with the like the sidesteps, but the movies are obviously perhaps the biggest what we could have had in Doctor Who history. And this, I think, does a cracking job of, well, this series that we're about to discuss, these first 4 adventures, do a cracking job of kind of picking up from that, sort of brushing aside the bits that needed brushing aside and just kind of retuning it to fit with what Big Finish were doing at the time. I guess the fact that we're not pushing for an American audience here, and various things like that. So they kind of smooth out the character a little bit. I feel almost straight away and get it right. So this is something we might pick up on as we go along. But for now, I'm going to be quiet and let you give us your review of Storm Warning.
Okay, thank you. There's so much Paul McGann audio work out there now that it's hard to imagine the impact when he joined Big Finish. Mind you, it hadn't even been 5 years since the TV movie when Storm Warning came out. It probably felt like longer. McGann is instantly wonderful here, bubbling with energy and bouncing off of everyone in the cast, then eventually calming down an invading alien army just with animal noises. The only downside is the script, which, sans companion, has him talk to himself and describe what he can see to an extent that would have... Oh, sorry, that sentence went a bit wrong. I'll start again. The only downside is the script, which, sans companion, has him talk to himself and describe what he can see to an extent that would have even Spider-Man concerned. And to be honest, it's not just him, but he gets the worst of it overall. The story is historically minded, which helps set up the new companion. Charlie Pollard is an incorrigible adventurer, hence she has stowed aboard the R101 for the sheer thrill of it. We get a further sense of time and place from the crew, particularly entrepreneur Lord Tamworth, whose ambitions go beyond the plaudits of launching Britain's finest airship to the capture of an alien spaceship. Old imperialism and the youthful need for change are both felt across these characters. The sci-fi plot feels of a piece with the kind of adventure stories Charlie might read. India Fisher was a hell of a find. Well done, whoever clocked her in Winter for the Adept, and she is exactly what the Eighth Doctor needs, matching his enthusiasm throughout. She even goes slightly too far at points, which means that he'll have to rein it in, particularly when it comes to the bigger picture. Storm Warning also sets up the ongoing arc of Charlie's impossible survival. I'm tempted to say, shouldn't Lord Tamworth have died as well? Why is that one okay, since aliens rescued him too, but presumably there's a loophole to explain that. It's a bit odd that Charlie sits out a chunk of the story, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that 1. The prominence of the companion in their first story is something the new series has heightened. It wasn't always like that. See also the Eighth Doctor novels. And 2. The third episode spends a huge amount of time explaining the aliens. For about 30 minutes, there's simply nowhere for Charlie to contribute. This does slow the story down quite a bit, and it feels similar to the way characters often over-describe things. The story has so much vim, though, that I didn't really mind the quibbles. McGann and Fisher are delightful. Gareth Thomas is dynamic as Tamworth. The aliens, though fond of exposition, are an interesting idea. It's a solid start for another Big Finish era. I think it's worth it probably adding to all of that, or just kind of highlighting that point about the companion intros, because while I've been reading the Eighth Doctor novels, it really stands out that you don't get those kind of Rose Tyler sort of introductions where the episode is like really focused on who is the companion, why do they want to travel with the Doctor, and what do they get out of it, and what's their life like. That sort of stuff doesn't really happen in the novels, and it kind of just made me think, yeah, that's because I've seen the new series, and that's the new series' kind of take. So I sort of forget that wasn't always like that. And I think Big Finish probably does put a bit more effort into its character introductions than the classic series a lot of the time, especially things like Evelyn. But yeah, with Charlie, it's more of a just crack on, have an adventure, really, and her personality is sort of speaks for itself.
I have to admit, I quite like that, and I think that, like, Charlie is obviously introduced to be a character that lasts. You know, Charlie is the plan is Charlie's going to be around for a while, and indeed she is. How long was Storm warning to a girl that time forgot. Was it something like 8 years, 9 years?
Something like
Um,
that. Yeah.
there's a lot of Charlie. That anyway, yeah. And this is a character we go into a lot of depth on after a while. Like it takes us a little bit to get there. Like we get bits about her life. We learn a little bit more about her here and there. Zagreus is kind of a big one because we get introduced to Charlie's mother. Like it's actually very easy to forget how much work Zagreus does with Charlie because there's so much going on in Zagreus. So I kind of like the fact that it's a humble beginning. It's just somebody that happens to meet the Doctor on an adventure and they get on and he ends up rescuing her and we do get all of this web of time sort of storyline for quite a while now. But it does sort of evolve into other things. Charlie's adventures with the Doctor certainly go through phases, as we'll discover as this marathon continues. So, yeah, I kind of like this sort of low key beginning. She does kind of disappear for part 3. You're right. However, I think parts 1 and 2 do actually spend a bit of time introducing us to her. Like this is one of those stories where the plot doesn't really kick in till the best part of halfway through, which is absolutely fine and fairly common in quite a lot of Doctor Who. I'm looking at The Invasion, where the Cybermen don't turn up till the end of part 4, or Revelation of the Daleks, where the Doctor doesn't even get to where the story's happening until the second episode, So this story kind of does that. This story just kind of has a bit of running around going on the R101. It's establishing the historical stuff, and it's not until sort of the latter end of part 2 that we start to properly move into sci-fi territory. And I think that works. Like if we'd have snapped into part 3 earlier in the story, we'd probably both be sat here going, actually, this is a pretty rubbish introduction for Charlie. She's only there because the series requires her to be. But it does give that bit of breathing space at the start, and we do get to spend a little bit of time with her, and she's already on her own adventure when she meets the Doctor, and that kind of thing. So I like how it's done, and I like how Charlie's handled. Like I really like how Charlie's handled, certainly between this and Zagreus. I think it's done really, really well. I think this is an interesting way to approach a companion. There's more to it than a lot of the classic series, but less to it than the new series and even some Big Finish companions that have come since. Like newly introduced companions seem to come with their own storylines now. They're serving some kind of plotty purpose by joining the TARDIS. Whereas Charlie, certainly at this stage, isn't doing that. Gareth Thomas is finally in Doctor Who. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's funny really because I've heard this before. Probably not since watching a lot of Blake Seven several times. So yeah, it took me a moment to kind of clock that it's him because he's so posh in this. And I know that I've kind of joked / complained on the Blake Seven episodes we do that I'm kind of surprised by how posh. Well, received pronunciation is what I really mean.
Yeah.
Gareth Thomas is in that. In this, he's actually going for it, and he's playing an aristocrat, but he's got so much kind of energy. I mean, he's such a colourful and blustery actor that, yeah, you really. He's just very entertaining, and it feels like the kind of character that could. It's a good character, It's an interesting character who doesn't think he's a villain and he's doing all this stuff for imperial reasons. It could be all right, but not particularly fascinating, depending on who you cast. And I think they've really got it right. He's such an entertaining presence, which is saying a lot because you've got Paul McGann obviously who's just got heaps of novelty value just from showing up, but you've also got India Fisher kind of matching his freak, and they're both kind of so incorrigible in their own way. Yeah, the fact that you're listening to scenes and Gareth Thomas is kind of threatening to pull focus is sort of a mark of how good he was. It must have been I imagine, quite a selling point for him to kind of go, oh, we got a brand new Doctor, and it's the current Doctor Who. Do you want to be in his first ever story? That's yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that would have cut any ice with him, but since it's his first Doctor Who story, um, I would say only, but he's in the Dalek Empire stories as well. Yeah, no, he's fantastic.
And, I mean, just going back to his accent, we do get him in proper working class Welsh mode in Torchwood in the end.
Yes. I think he's in his first series, isn't he?
Was it Ghost Machine, I think?
Ghost, yeah. Yes, I can't remember who he is, but I know he's a very unpleasant man. That's all I remember.
He's the one that done the murder.
That'll be it.
In Ghost Machine, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he's fantastic in this. The weak point in it for me is, I guess, like the aliens, the villains. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I listened to this last week, and they've already completely disappeared from my mind.
Yeah, I didn't write it down.
No. But kind of the Triskele. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah. Helps to have TARDIS Wiki open while we record. The Triskele. They're a bit forgettable. Like, we get a little bit about sort of how their society works and what's going on, and you've got various parallels going on with what's going on Earth at the time. But as I say, they don't turn up until halfway through the story, more than halfway through the story, really. We get a whole episode dedicated to them, but they're not the villain. Sort of Rathbone's the villain, and Gareth Thomas is also a bit... He's not quite a villain, is he? But he's sort of the bureaucrat.
Shady.
He's shady. He's shifty. He's got an agenda. So they're kind of incidental. You know, they're there because the plot needs them to be, and they don't particularly do much. So yeah.
I was just going to say, I think the problem is that they are an interesting... I genuinely think they're an interesting idea, but it's so much work to get it across. I don't know how you would do it better. Maybe it's the sort of thing that would work better in a book or something, but you've got to put so much time into just kind of communicating, okay, so you've got this species, they're sort of broken up into different factions, they're all like a gestalt thing overall, and so you end up with these scenes of the Doctor and Tamworth and other characters, I think, kind of just sort of stood there, like giving them feed questions, and you sort of have to get us to a rounded picture of what they are. Yeah, it's hard. It's I don't really know how you could do it better, but it does kind of stop the story in its tracks because of these creatures who need so much work to kind of get the idea across.
I think I do know how you do it better, actually, which is the way Doctor Who's done it so many times before. And you have the Doctor turn around and go, oh, they're the Triskele. They are this kind of species, this kind of society, and this is what their agenda will be. As he has done with so many other alien races throughout Doctor Who.
Yeah, you're right. Like that would have done it.
Yeah, the Doctor's there to explain that to us. But I guess that would make this an episode shorter if that were to happen. I don't know. I like this one. It's nowhere near the best release ever, but it's a damn good introduction for the Eighth Doctor and Charlie, and it kind of gives us what we need to just go off and have some adventures with these guys now. So yeah, I like Storm Warning. It's a winner. It does exactly what it needs to do. It does, like I say, have that little bit of a lull, but so far introducing the Eighth Doctor to Big Finish and giving him more than his less than 60-minute screen time in the movie is working. It's a success, and I'm glad we're doing this. Before we move on, I think it's really interesting, I think, that they chose to do this as a series within a series. Like everything else, even like the Sixth Doctor and Evelyn, has just been sort of a random smattering of releases. There's not been any logical order to the releases so far. We've had, you know, 2 Fifth Doctors before we got a Seventh Doctor, and Six and Evelyn seem to have had a load bunched together, and now we're not going to see them for a bit, and all this kind of thing. I think coming up in the not too distant future, we have 2 Six and Evelyns on the bounce, don't we, with Blood Tide and Project Twilight?
Yeah.
But there's no. I'm sure when they were making them and producing them in the early days, there was an absolute logic as to why they were being released in that order, and I'm assuming it's something to do with when the script was ready. But this is an effort to be a series. This is 4 stories on the bounce with a new Doctor. This is new Doctor Who. And I do wonder if Big Finish subscribers at the time were sort of starting to miss the other Doctors, because inevitably, if you're going to highlight the 8th Doctor for a third of the year, you are casting aside the 5th, 6th and 7th Doctors. So yeah, I just kind of wonder what the initial reaction to that kind of scheduling was.
I wonder if it's kind of a first world problem, because were people just absolutely gagging for more 8th Doctor? You know, would they have kind of gone like, oh, actually, I think I can pause the other guys because, you know, we never have this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it was a success to some extent, because for the next run of 8th Doctor adventures, it's 6 months where all the other Doctors are kind of cast aside. I know we kind of got Excelis as they're still here, honest, but anyway, let's continue with this series then, as it is indeed a series, and we're going on to Sword of Orion. Significant for a few reasons, I guess. The main one being Cybermen. We've managed to go like 16 releases without the Cybermen at Big Finish, and surely they must have been itching to get the Cybermen on audio as well. We've had a few Dalek stories at this stage, but Cybermen are obviously the other biggie, closely followed by the Master, and indeed they are closely followed by the Master. It's only another few releases till Dust Breeding. So yeah, talk to us about Sword of Orion.
Okay. By this point, Big Finish had put out a few classic monster stories with Daleks and Ice Warriors. It would be fair to say these weren't their most experimental scripts, with one being repurposed from audio visuals. Now here's another one, also based on AV, with the Cybermen making their audio debut. Unfortunately, another one just about sums it up. Much about this will be familiar to a seasoned sci-fi fan. You've got an abandoned spaceship, a bunch of grousing space salvage guys who just want their bonus, Cybermen in hibernation, Cybermats sneaking around on the quiet, and for the most part, that's it. Sword of Orion grumbles along harmlessly, doing a decent impression of a lost Eric Saywood script. It's got atmosphere. What it's lacking is ideas. Virtually nothing happens that deviates from the general template of this spaceship has Cybermen on it. I'm amazed it can fill 4 episodes. There is a germ of something, the human versus android war. This would go on to support the Big Finish Cyberman miniseries. Unfortunately, it's kept entirely in the background here, only spilling over into the actual plot towards the end of the final episode. Apart from that, we have the Cybermen, who aren't really characters in the same sense as Daleks. They can't support a lot of scenes by themselves, and the humans, who all have dull space names like Grash and Vol, and are all basically unlikable. McGann is good. There's nothing really to get his teeth into, but you can clearly rely on him to make it sound exciting whatever happens. And India Fisher keeps Charlie's enthusiasm at the forefront, despite the danger all around her. Unlike Evelyn's peculiar gung-ho attitude in the apocalypse element, this seems on brand for Charlie. There's nothing egregiously wrong with Sword of Orion, and if you find yourself lacking trad space monster stories, then this might be up your street. Context matters, and there was genuinely something to be said for releasing the first trad McGann story at the time, but I struggle to get much out of it now.
It's very much a this one happens story.
Yeah.
But it does have quite a legacy. Um, the Garazone system reappears quite a lot moving forward. The war with the androids, such an interesting concept actually, the human android war, and it's really sort of underbaked here. Like it just kind of it's a thing that's happening in the background. It's not hugely dug into or explained. Now, I heard Big Finish's Cybermen spin off before I heard Sword of Orion, and I was expecting to go into Sword of Orion and have sort of a lot of things that were referenced, kind of explained, and they never were. Like, I just expected it to add a bit of context to the Cyberman series, and it's not there. It just isn't. I quite like the Cyberman series. We should podcast about it sometime. But yeah, I think this and there's a Seventh Doctor release somewhere around 100 in this range that kind of goes back to Cybermen in this era. I can't remember what it is now. Is it called Kingdom of Silver or something like that?
That is one of them. Yeah, that's the Seventh Doctor.
Yeah. And that kind of has something to do, is set around this as well. A couple of the characters are androids, maybe. But yeah, it just feels like, even though there's a spin off series that comes out of this, it still feels like there's room for another spin off series to come out of this. Yeah, it feels a little bit half baked. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. It also has a sequel, like the Further Adventure S box set had a. Was it Heart of Orion?
I think it was. Yeah.
It was an Orion sequel anyway. It was a direct sequel to this story, but it wasn't a Cyberman story, and I really liked it. I thought it was really good. It kind of picked up on one of the more kind of interesting ideas for this, which was kind of picking up with Jansen, who I thought, interesting character. Like, one of the big mysteries of the script is sort of focused around her, and again, not an awful lot is done with it. The Cybermen are there. They do Cybermen-y things. You're right, actually. It's very sort of Saywood-esque, I think. The way they're handled. They're basically just there as evil muscle. There's nothing in this one to make me dislike it, but there's nothing in this one to make me go, oh, it's amazing. It's just, it's a nice trad bit of Doctor Who that takes a little while to get to the point. Episode 1 doesn't really do an awful lot for the story. But when we get to the Cybermen, they're good. They're used as well as they were in TV Doctor Who for a good chunk of it. Yeah, I've no problems with this one. There's just nothing to make me feel it's an amazing piece of Doctor Who. It's there, it's all right, and I'm just really enjoying the Eighth Doctor and Charlie at this stage.
Yeah, they do. They lift it up, even if you find their sort of surroundings a little drab. It's still worth it for those two.
I think that's a very interesting point that we should perhaps just kind of park for a little while. Like, the Eighth Doctor and Charlie can redeem a story when they're themselves, if you see what I'm hinting at.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there. Let's move on then. Let's move on to, perhaps from a world building, maybe is the best word, point of view, perhaps the most interesting story we've had so far in this range. It's the Stones of Venice. Go ahead, talk to us about it.
The Eighth Doctor series adds a bit of flavour with the arrival of Paul Mars, already a seasoned McGann writer. See BBC Books. The Stones of Venice is as lyrical and fun as his usual work, if a bit less wacky. There's still the Marsian sense of magic threatening to supplant sci-fi, with slightly crazy mythology being dropped into things willy-nilly. Here, the casual evolution of amphibian gondoliers who presumably have their own underwater domain beneath Venice. Mercifully for the sci-fi minded, like me, plot events like the Duke of Venice being 100 years old and an apparent curse dooming the city of Venice are explained in the end. Characters also, as is usual for Mars, seem somewhat aware that they're conforming to storytelling tropes or styles, the Doctor and Charlie in particular. It's not a favourite style of mine, as it makes it all feel less real, but that's the author's style, and I'm clearly just a sourpuss for not loving it. Carry on, everyone. I've read that this was the first story recorded by McGann and Fisher. To some extent, I think that's apparent. Charlie seems haughtier than usual, and doesn't get that much to do. A critical plot point involves her taking a drug that makes her act like someone else for a bit. Not sure I followed that, which seems like something that could have developed into something more than just setting her aside for a possible marriage later on. Still, I think you can tell that the duo are relishing the colourful material, and it really is one that you can picture. It feels like a historical, but it's set in the future. It's magical, but not really, and the Doctor and Charlie affirm that they are now best friends. I don't think I entirely love it, for whatever reason, but there's lots in here to love. I think I'm a little bit conflicted about Paul Mars. Like, he's obviously extremely talented, and apparently he's a very fast writer. I think I heard somewhere that he turned around the Stones of Venice in a couple of days while he was on a retreat or something. But the kind of sort of quasi magical, dreamlike nature of some of the stuff he does, it can turn me off a bit, and I'm very aware that that's personal taste. It's just kind of the type of stories he tells. I don't know how to kind of put it into words really, but it's slightly off center of my kind of understanding of Doctor Who. That's, I still think I'm obviously wrong here. Like, I get that he is incredible and enormously popular, but yes, something about his work sometimes leaves me feeling a little bit shut out. With this one, I think it's fun enough not to mind, but that stuff is still there a little bit for me. With the kind of, like you said, the world building. I'm absolutely all for world building, but sometimes if it feels like kind of one writer has gone, well, I reckon the world is a bit like this, and it's done in a way where sort of nobody else is going to pick up on that. That kind of feels like an anomaly to me. But again, personal taste is, one person finds it a bit weird, another person loves it.
I think the magic versus science Doctor Who debate has roared on since the early 70s and will continue for the rest of time. I don't think this breaks any fundamental rules of what Doctor Who is in terms of what it kind of brings in, what it offers. I think you're right, it does kind of like, you have got curses and 100-year-old dukes and that kind of thing, but it is kind of explained away, and, well, an alien did it. And I don't think in Doctor Who every alien science should be pinned down and immediately understandable to us. I kind of like the idea of science that appears as magic, which is what all magic in Doctor Who kind of is. Like, we were told with the like just before Shooting Atwa's first story went out, you're gonna have to get used to sort of more fantastical Doctor Who now. And there's always been some level of scientific inverted commas explanation for it. The science of ropes with the goblins and all this kind of thing, and nonsense in reality, but that explanation is there. That rationalisation of what appears to be magic is there, and I think that's the case here anyway. Also, it's set in the future, and as a species, we are living longer and longer. Maybe in the far distant future, being a Duke and living to 100 is perfectly reasonable. I don't know.
It's strange. That choice is quite odd, isn't it? To set it in the future, because it feels like a historical. It's kind of both.
So we live in a society where we've completed music as something we consume physically. We've done vinyl, we've done tapes, we've done CDs, and then music has transcended and become a digital thing. And as a society, we have all turned around and we've all gone, we liked vinyl best, so that's what we're going to go with. That records are how we going, the way that we are now going to physically consume music. And record sales disappeared to nowhere and then suddenly skyrocketed because we kind of reached the stage where we could look back over everything that we've done and pick the best bit. And maybe that's what Venice has done here. Maybe Venice has kind of gone, well, it was at its peak in this era, so let's adopt that aesthetic and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I understand it. Nostalgia's a thing. We looked at... we did a trilogies episode not that long ago looking at the Stockbridge trilogy, and the final story in that Stockbridge was kind of preserved in a dome, wasn't it? So I guess it's within the realms of human nature. I kind of understand it. But yeah, I like sort of a historical futuristic setting. Think like the androids of Tara as well and that sort of thing. I guess this just irks a little bit because it's set in a real place on Earth. Which, yeah, I kind of get. It is the first one they recorded, definitely, with the Eighth Doctor and Charlie. So you have got that kind of Doctor Who tradition of let's not put the first story recorded out first. Looking at Castrovalva and Fall to Doomsday.
Yeah.
But it holds up better than Fall to Doomsday. I'm a big fan of this one. Yeah. I'm a big fan of this one. I think it's a great deal of fun. I think like I say, I think this is the best example of sort of world building that we've had so far. I've said this before and somebody's pointed out the Holy Terror. And the Holy Terror, it doesn't give you a feel for how that society functions, like how the everyday person in that society is, because there are no everyday people in that society. They're all constructs. Whereas this feels like how Venice works and you know how the people live and all that kind of thing. I mean, a lot of people have cleared off by the stage we join the story, but I just think it does sort of it does create its own world and has its own aesthetic and indeed its own set of rules with the whole magic thing and the alien influence that's led to that. It's a winner for me. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's very interesting, and it just gives us something a little bit different to work with. And following the relatively trad Storm Warning and the super trad Sword of Orion, it's quite good to have something that's just out there. It's good to have a very different kind of story with the Eighth Doctor and Charlie. Even if it does involve weird personality changing drugs to give Charlie something to do. Should we move on?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to move on? You know what's next.
Oh, well. Well, eat your vegetables. You got to get through it.
Yes, that's it. If you can't have any pudding unless you eat your meat, or whatever Pink Floyd said. Minuet in Hell. I'm not going to say anything beforehand. I'm going to let you do your review because I found myself surprised listening to this one. So you go first, and then I'll do my thing.
All right. We've got another audio-visuals adaptation here, which makes me wonder if the Eighth Doctor stories were done in a bit of a hurry once they got McGann on board, meaning it was quicker to rewrite something than write it from scratch. That's just a guess, but Minuet in Hell does feel like a rush job. Some of the editing isn't great, with scenes ending in a hurried fade-out, and on a broader note, there's little reason for it to run as long as it does. Things like speeches and even emails trundle on for their full length instead of, for example, having protagonists summarize them to each other. I wonder if they had enough time to edit it. Mind you, part of that could be because of the story's choices, which omit the Doctor and Charlie for large chunks, keeping them amnesiac rather than dealing with or commenting on the action. This leads to somewhat entertaining misdirects with McGann and Nick Briggs as Gideon, a man who argues that he is the Doctor after all. This is not going to convince anyone familiar with Paul McGann's voice, but it's at least amusing, if a bit indulgent, that Briggs approximates his audio-visuals Doctor for a bit. Ultimately, though, all these scenes do is delay the resolution. The Doctor's absence leaves the stakes a bit vague. It's normally his job to reinforce what the threat is and what's being done about it. And tellingly, things move much faster when he's compos mentis again. Until then, we have the Brigadier. Delightful as ever, but is it really a solid use of the character, sat in his room sending emails? Charlie feels a little surplus to requirements, not for the first time. There's another arranged marriage in this one. This is getting to be a habit. McGann is good, getting to play a bit of madness, and even reversing one of his TV movie lines to "Who are you?" The villains are quite fun. Robert Jezik gives a good, very un-Frobisher performance, while Morgan Deere is hugely entertaining as a rampaging demon, although he does sound a bit like a man-sized Muppet. We also have a young woman who hunts the undead, summons demons, mad scientists, swapping people's brains, and a setting that's supposed to be the modern day, but what with the hoary old accents and the Hellfire Club, feels more like early last century, with occasional jump scare mentions of CD-ROMs. It's an unfocused mess, but I didn't find it quite as disagreeable as its reputation suggests. There are flashes of good ideas and memorable performances underneath all the stuff.
So I reckon I've heard this 4 or 5 times now. I think this is probably the 4th go. And I remember when I first heard it, I absolutely hated it. It was awful. Like, I didn't know anything about it going into it. I was geared up for the 8th Doctor and the Brigadier teaming up to do awesome things. And it's great that they got this done before Nicholas Courtney passed away. So obviously I did not get this. I got a very frustrating listen where the thing I wanted from the story didn't happen. So I left it going, yeah, I really didn't like that. Never mind. Listened to it again quite a while after and went into it just remembering that I despised it and it was one of the worst things that I ever heard. Then didn't listen to it again for quite a few years and went into it and started to appreciate what it was doing. Like I'd reached the point of acceptance. I'd kind of gone, okay, I'm not getting my 8th Doctor Brigadier team up in the way that I wanted. What else is there then? And found that I started to, enjoy bits of it, find bits of it memorable, find bits of it quite amusing actually. And then re-listened to it this time and actually at points found myself enjoying it. It's so bloody flawed. Like, I'm not pretending that on the 4th listen I have found that it's actually a hidden gem in Big Finish's crown. It isn't. It's got so many problems. It's really clumsy. It does feel like it was edited in a hurry. It's grossly overlong. This is by far the longest we've had so far. Like even longer than Holy Terror. Now the Holy Terror was really, really long, but never felt it. It never felt like, yeah, okay, we need to get this over and done with now. Whereas this did. It takes far too long for the Doctor to know who the Doctor is. So obviously before we were saying that the 8th Doctor and Charlie can genuinely save a story no matter what. But the problem with this is they're never together. The Doctor cannot remember who he is at all. In fact, we're gaslit into thinking Nicholas Briggs is the Doctor. And Charlie just kind of goes through things because something has to happen with the character. Charlie's story in this, I'm always reminded of the series 24. In the series 24, in the first series, Jack Bauer's daughter has something to do. She is an integral part of the plot. In series 2, she's not. She's kind of just a main character that we need to do something with. and it just goes off in all kinds of bizarre directions. Like there's a point where she kind of gets lost in a forest and there are coyotes or something along those lines there, and you just sort of think, what's this got to do with the terrorists blowing up the whole world plot that's going on? She just kind of goes through this really silly story, like there was nothing for them to do with the character at all throughout that series, but she was contracted to be in every episode, so they just kind of had to make it work. And that's kind of how I feel about what happens to Charlie here. Just like things happen to Charlie because we have to remember that Charlie is a character. Part of me wonders, would this be more effective if Charlie was actually absent for a big chunk of it? I don't want Charlie to be absent for a big chunk of it. I really don't want Charlie to be absent for a big chunk of her fourth story. But what if Charlie was absent for a big chunk of it? We have the Doctor not knowing who he is in an asylum, and it's essentially just the Brigadier that's leading absolutely everything. I think that's probably a more interesting story. But there's no way that they were going to relegate Charlie to only popping up in the last quarter or whatever. And indeed, it was not the right thing to do at the time. I can't help but think that the solution to this one is just rip it up and start again, do something different. However, it's there, it exists, we've got to talk about it, and you're right, it's not as bad as its reputation exists. I think it just represents a lot of disappointments to somebody going into it for the first time. And I think that when you get over those disappointments, there's stuff in there to enjoy. Like, the accents are fun. There's some good humour in there. The Brigadier's great, because the Brigadier's always great. In the last episode, when the Doctor knows who he is again, it's absolutely cracking. Like, as soon as the Doctor sort of snaps into it and starts to sort things out, it's brilliant. It's a really, really good sort of last 20-25 minutes, but the journey there, it just goes on way too long.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's production troubles seem like the issue, but it makes me wonder if they did have to go. He's just said yes, we need to lock him down. What have we got? And they thought, well, we could rewrite this one, and that could be a decent fit. Which is ironic, really, because by all accounts, it was quite a hellish experience to rewrite it. So it wouldn't have saved them any time, really. But that strikes me as that must have been the germ of this, because otherwise, surely you would just go, like, surely you can come up with 4 ideas for, your Paul McGann series. Yeah, so that might explain it. I do think the story has some stuff going for it, but like things like that young lady who I've forgotten the character's name, but she hunts the undead. That's that's interesting on its own, but it's kind of not. There isn't really room for that. And demons are part of the story. There was moaning about Stones of Venice, but this one's got demons in it. But again, that's not a huge, not the be all end all of it, because it's about somebody trying to sort of swap people's brains around. Yeah, it doesn't seem to know what its kind of main focus should be, and it has lots of stuff flying around. And in amongst all of that, you have the Brigadier. It's slightly lost in a way, like he doesn't have a huge amount to do. And it's almost ironic, really, because you had that very satisfying return in Spectre of Lanyon Moor, which was like, okay, you have got the Sixth Doctor and Brigadier story now. Here you go. It's what you want. And this feels like it is not the Eighth Doctor and Brigadier story you would want. So this sort of ends up becoming kind of something where it would have been nice if they could have another crack at it. But obviously, they weren't able to do that. Yeah, you get the sense Paul McGann's at least having fun. I mean, I tend to think actors like Paul McGann and Peter Davison, it's sort of it's on Big Finish to kind of give them stuff to keep them interested and excited by this. And I think playing madness, that's always appealing to an actor, so he does have that. But yeah, it's when you've got your new Doctor and companion, you kind of want them in the centre, being themselves and having adventures. It's the sort of thing that I think might have been fun to do later when they're so well established that you can have fun with them as kind of negatives of themselves. But at this stage, it's a bit like, this is not what we want. we just want them to be themselves and deal with the story that way.
Well, you'll be delighted to hear that moving forwards, we are definitely going to get some Eighth Doctor losing his memory content.
Well, he'd already done it 3 times between the TV movie and the novels by this point, so why break the habit of a lifetime?
Yep, the tradition of the Eighth Doctor losing his memory is strong. But yeah, it's here, it's a release, it's a thing that happened, and yeah, I got more out of it this time than I ever had before, and I think maybe you need to be burned before you can enjoy this one. That's kind of my conclusion. But yeah, I think it's fun. It's got a lot to offer. It's certainly not boring. It goes on a bit, but it's not boring. You've got some hilarious accents to keep you entertained, if nothing else.
I think it's too weird to be boring. It's very, very colourful.
Yeah. It's not a traditional story. Like we are not in super trad territory here. But I think it wears some of its influences a little bit too sort of prominently on its sleeve, and I think it does go on a bit, and I think they should have found a way to sort those email scenes out, because blimey, the Brigadier spends a lot of time typing and then receives a reply in like 10 seconds.
It's very boomer using a computer, isn't it? It's quite painful.
It is, and I'd have been okay with that joke once towards the start of the first episode, but it happens again and again and again and again and again. It's actually a subplot that just gets resolved at the end, that like the person he's emailing's in on it with the baddies. But it just kind of gets lost as a subplot because it's literally, you know, we often say things along the lines of there are certain actors in Doctor Who we'd be happy to just hear reading the phone book, like William Russell, Nicholas Courtney, and so on, Peter Purvis. Well, this is pretty close. This is pretty close to just getting Nick Courtney to read the phone book. Okay, well that's our first run of Eighth Doctor Adventures out the way. And we've kind of partitioned these off into its own episode because we've done 5 releases per episode up to this point, but we kind of thought it'd be an odd tonal shift to jump from this to Loop Guru. So we're going to discuss that in our next 275 episode, which shouldn't be too far down the line. We're recording these at quite a rate, and I'm enjoying it. I'm listening to these at quite a rate, and I'm really enjoying it. Like, I'm really, really genuinely enjoying marathoning the monthly range. So let's keep it up.
Definitely.
We'll leave this one there though. So thank you very much again, Gareth, for joining me, and we'll return to discuss the monthly range a bit more soon. So goodbye now.
Bye-bye for now.